The apostles raised up or healed 2 sick people last week. We've seen Saul struck blind, and it's odd how God could strike you blind but make you able to see at the same time. So we've seen how that works, and we're getting down to a guy named Cornelius. He is a centurion, and this name centurion, if you think about it, you can kind of put 2 and 2 together. How many years are in a century? A century is 100 years.
Okay. Yeah.
So a centurion is over 100 men. So he would lead 100 men into battle. So he has to be a pretty sharp guy. He's got to be a stand-up dude to be able to take care of 100 men and lead them into battle. And another thing I want to cover is this place we're going to be talking about is Caesarea. Caesarea is a massive seaport that is on the Mediterranean Sea right there close to Jerusalem, and it is named after Julius Caesar. That's why it's called Caesarea. And it's the administrative capital of Judea. So when the Romans come in, that's where they set up their place. That's where Pilate's at, and when they have any kind of big thing going on at the temple, Pilate and his men will go down to the temple to make sure there ain't no kind of uprisings. So you can imagine, just keep in mind of the Jews, how they feel towards these people, especially a centurion. So you have the person that is pretty much one of your oppressors. They're in slavery, and not so many words, but this is kind of their slave owners, the people that kind of keep the stuff going. So we're just going to dive right in, and I'll kind of try to explain it as we go. Chapter 10, there was a centurion man in Caesarea called Cornelius, and a centurion of the band called the Italian Band. So this is the 100 men of army. The band is like an army. So it's the 100 army. He's over those 100 people. Verse 2, a devout man and one that feared God with all his house, which gave much alms to the people and prayed to God always, which is always. When it says he gave alms to the people, it would be giving alms to the Jewish people. Verse 3, he saw in a vision, evidently about the 9th hour of the day, an angel of God coming into him and saying unto him, Cornelius. And when he looked on him, he was afraid and said, what is it, Lord? And this word Lord right here again is more like to say sir in this circumstance. And just to stop right here, you got a Roman soldier that is taught to go right headlong into battle and fight and not to be scared, but when an angel of the Lord comes up on you, it scares him. So, I mean, all bets are off when an angel of the Lord jumps up in your face trying to tell you what to do. So I just thought that was something to point out. And so he says, what is it, Lord? And he said unto him, thy prayers and thine alms are come up for memorial before God. It's kind of hard to understand a memorial. God remembers him for what he does, is what that means. And it'll say it again here in a minute. It'll make more sense. And now send men to Joppa and call for one Simon, whose surname is Peter. He lodged with one Simon a tanner, whose house is by the seaside. He shall tell thee what thou oughtest to do. And when the angel which spoke unto Cornelius was departed, he called 2 of his household servants and a devout soldier of them that waited on him continually. So he called up 3 men right there. And when he had declared all these things unto them, he sent them to Joppa. So what's just happened right here? an angel of the Lord come to Cornelius and said, send out for Simon Peter. He's at Simon's house, the tanner. So without even question, he gets the servant and his two guys and sends them out to Joppa. And just one thing to point out here, where Simon Peter is and where Cornelius is about between 30 to 35 miles. So it's going to take a few days. You'll find out it was 4 days. Could you imagine having to walk 30 miles and then you'll find out that he stays with Simon and then walk back 30 miles? And I bring this up because it's 30 miles away and they're at Caesarea. But right now, at this point, just a couple of chapters ago, Philip, the evangelist, you will find out in, I think, chapter 21 or something like that, you'll find out Philip is the great evangelist. Philip was a smart cat, and he was the one a couple of chapters ago that went out to Samaria. He is also the one that went and taught the eunuch, the Ethiopian eunuch, and baptized him. And salvation is fixing to be opened up to the Gentiles. And last week or week before we talked about the eunuch being a Gentile, but he was a Gentile, but he also had been converted to Judaism. So he was not just a flat out Gentile. He was he followed Judaism. He believed that, and he went to the prayer times at the temple. He showed up at the temple to do the prayer with the Judeans. So it's a little bit different circumstances here because you're in opposition to the people. So just keep that in mind because we're fixing to get a little further into it. But going back, I'm rabbit chasing here, just trying to pull everything together. So Philip would probably be at Caesarea. Why didn't God just say, hey, send right next door, he's probably a stone throws away in Caesarea, to Philip and say, hey, get Philip over here to preach to you. Keep that in the back of your mind because I'm fixing to answer that question, or y'all may answer it for yourselves. But he's going around the back of his head to scratch his eye, you know what I'm saying? Because Peter needs this also. So we're going to go on to verse 9 and we'll kind of connect all this together. On the morrow, as they went on their journey and drew nigh unto the city, Peter went up upon the housetop to pray about the 6th hour. And if you ever see the 6th hour to 9th hour, if you ever want to figure out what time it is, if you'll start at 6 o'clock at sunrise and go 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock. So it would have been 12 o'clock. That's just a fun fact. It's important right here because you'll see. About the 6th hour, which would have been lunchtime, and he became very hungry. It's lunchtime, so who ain't hungry at lunchtime? And would have eaten, but while they were made ready, he fell into a trance. So they were getting the food ready, he fell into a trance. This trance is the same word that would have been in the Old Testament, deep sleep. When anytime God talked to any of the Old Testament people, you remember deep sleep. This is the same word, it's just different, translated a little different. 11, and saw heaven opened, and a certain vessel descending unto him, as it had been a great sheet knit at 4 corners, and knit means gathered, and let down to the earth, wherein were all manners of 4-footed beasts, and of the earth, and wild beasts, and creepy things, and fowl of the air. And there came a voice to him, Rise, Peter, kill and eat. But Peter said, No. Okay, so, not so. I'm sorry, he didn't say no. He said, Not so, Lord, for I have never eaten anything that is that is common or unclean. So, man, you gotta love Peter for this, because he's been doing it since the beginning. Peter let me wash your feet. No. Wash my whole body. He says, no. Let me wash your feet. You're clean. Peter, I'm about to be crucified, and they're going to take me, and I'm not, I'm going to die, and I'm going to rise after the third day. And he says, no. We're not going to let this happen to you. And what's Jesus telling him? Get behind me, Satan. What's one of the other ones that Peter does? Peter in the middle of the day, Jesus says, let's go fishing. Peter says, no, man, it's in the middle of the day. This is not, we fish at night around here. And he said, let's go. So they go out there and they catch all them fish. So, Peter is the hard-headed. He is so hard-headed. And I think it's wild because Peter's original name was Simon. And Simon meant hearer. I think because his name was Hearer, he didn't hear good, so Jesus changed his name to Rock. But it was Simon, and this also is something else to think about. You remember one of the minor prophets that was hard-headed, and he decided not to go to Nineveh to preach to the people, and he got on a boat and ended up getting threw off the boat, and a big whale got him. Remember him? What's his name? Jonah. Simon's name is Simon, son of Jonah. Not that he's the son of that Jonah, but he's son of Jonah. So you can see the resemblance of that hard-headedness. I thought that was neat. Okay, getting back on track. But Peter said, not so, Lord, for I have never eaten anything unclean, that is common or unclean. So there's a sheet. Think of a sheet, a big sheet, and somebody's got four corners of it, and in this sheet, animals are in it. And evidently there's unclean animals, and there's actual animals that they're allowed to eat. And if you'll go to Leviticus chapter 11, and it'll explain all the animals and that the Jews are able to eat. But we'll find out in a minute what this means. There's a lot of people that say this means that, this lifted the cap off of whatever he wants to eat, he can eat. But, it's got a lot more greater meaning than that. 15, and a voice spake unto him again the second time, what God hath cleansed, that call not thou common. This done thrice, and the vessel was received up again into heaven. So God told him, says, what I make clean, you can't call common or unclean. So you see what happened. He's seen all these unclean animals, and God told him 3 times to kill and eat. And kill and eat, Peter. He says, not so. Kill and eat, Peter, not so. And he says, kill and eat. And he goes, I guess Peter's like, well, I might want to listen because this is not going away. And that happens to Peter, 3 in threes, always. Remember, denying 3 times, and do you love me 3 times? And So that went back up into heaven. Now while Peter doubted in himself what the vision which he had seen should mean, behold, the men which were sent from Cornelius had made an inquiry of Simon's house, and stood before the gate, and called and said whether Simon, which was surnamed Peter, were lodged there. Okay, so the 3 people that Cornelius sent has just showed up to the gate, asking where Simon the tanner's house is. Where's Simon Peter? While Peter, on 19, while Peter thought on the vision, the Spirit said unto him, behold, 3 men seek thee. Arise therefore and get thee down and go with them, doubting nothing, for I have sent them. So those men showed up, and God told him that I sent these 3 men with them. Don't doubt what they're saying, just go with them. Then Peter went down to the men which were sent unto him from Cornelius, and said, behold, I am he whom you seek. What is the cause wherefore you come? You know, he just said don't doubt him, just go with him, and then he's going to say, why are you here? And they said, Cornelius, the centurion, a just man, and one that feareth God, and of good report among all the nations of the Jews, was warned from God by a holy angel to send for thee into his house and to hear words of thee. So he's saying Cornelius said he's seen an angel and he sent us to come get you and to hear what you had to say to us. So, come with us. And 23, then called he them in and lodged them. And on the morrow Peter went away with them, and a certain brethren from Joppa accompanied him. And the morrow after they entered into Caesarea, and Cornelius waited for them and had called together his kinsmen. And kinsmen just means his kinfolks, his family, and near friends. 25, and as Peter was coming in, Cornelius met him and fell down at his feet and worshipped him. So, as soon as Peter showed up at Cornelius' house, Cornelius, this big old brutally Roman soldier, jumped down and started worshiping at Peter's feet. And I just think back when Peter denied him, and Peter hadn't went through all the stuff Peter went through with God and been humbled so much. How easy would this have been for Peter to be like, hey, this is pretty cool. I got a centurion worshiping my feet when, not too long ago he's probably bashing in my cousin's head. But you see his reaction. And where was that? Where was I at? 27. 26. But Peter took him up, saying, stand up, I myself also am I a man. So he said, no, I'm a man. You just stand up. I'm not, I'm nothing special. I'm just a regular old person. And this also happened to Paul and Barnabas. I think in a few more chapters we're going to see this. Maybe not. I don't know if it was here or if it was in one of the other ones. But anyway, Paul and Barnabas shows up to a place and they start killing stuff and trying to worship them. They're like, hey, whoa, no, don't be doing this. Also, the men that tried to worship Jesus' mom, you remember them? And Jesus is like, hey, you don't be worshiping my mom. So, you got to be careful. And as 27, and as he talked with them, he went in and found many that were come together. So there was a lot of people in there waiting on Peter to get there. And he said unto them, you know how that it is an unlawful thing for a man that is a Jew to keep company or come unto one of another's nation. But God has showed me that I should not call any man common or unclean. So he's saying, as a Jew, my political background and my with all my laws says, I'm not supposed to come into a house with a Gentile. He's just at a tanner's house, and that was a no-no also. And if any time you was a rabbi, or if you had any kind of authority in Judaism, if you come in contact with anything that was unclean, there was like a big ritual ceremony of washing that you would have to do before you even went back into the temple. They would pretty much would just shun you if you hadn't been clean. So he's just saying, and that whole vision he had about the animals, don't call anything that, don't call anything that I've cleaned up unclean or common. And that was part of what he just learned. The Gentiles were not unclean. They were just, Gentiles. They wasn't Jewish. There wasn't nothing wrong with them. This was a God-fearing man. And something that, I'm getting on rabbit chases a lot, but something else I wanted to point out is this man was not saved, but God remembered what he was doing because of his good works and made a way for him to meet Jesus. That's radical. A lot of people think if you're unsaved that God don't hear you or God looks down at you, but this guy wasn't saved, and God heard his prayers and looked. He's like, you know what? I see his heart. He's a good dude. I'm gonna make a way for this to happen. I think that's awesome. Anyway, back to where we was going. He said, God has showed me that I should not call any man common or unclean. Therefore, came unto you without gainsaying. That's without delay or without doubt. As soon as I was sent for, I should have finished out that sentence. And asked therefore, why for what intent ye have sent for me? And Cornelius said, 4 days ago I was fasting unto this hour, and at the 9th hour I prayed in my house, and behold, a man stood before me in bright clothing, and said, Cornelius, thy prayer is heard, and thine alms are had in remembrance in the sight of God. Send therefore to Joppa, and call hither Simon, whose surname is Peter. He is lodged in the house of one surnamed Simon, a tanner, by the seaside, who, when he cometh, shall speak unto thee. 33. Immediately therefore I sent to thee, and thou hast well done that thou art come. So he's saying right here, it's very hard to understand all this. So he's saying, immediately I sent somebody to come get you, and you come without delay. That's pretty much what that's saying. Now therefore we are all here present before God to hear all the things that are commanded thee of God. So Jesus is Peter's about to preach Jesus to him. And he's about to preach him the good news. And that word good news is Jesus come and died for you not to have to follow all these laws and do all this stuff. It would be terrible news to find out that you needed to live by this book, turn this way, do that way, pray 3 times a day, fast. And if you can do all that and you can sacrifice these animals on these days and you can live a good godly life, then you can work your way to be saved. That would be terrible news, because you could not do none of that. You can't do all of that. You can't follow all these laws. If you was able to follow the laws, there would be no need for Jesus to have come. So the good news is Jesus came, he lived a sinful life, and he died, and he rose the 3rd day. And we're fixing to read all that. And this is what he preaches. Sinless. What did I say?
Sinful.
Sinless. I'm sorry. I'm on another day.
We just had to get right. They're listening because they keep it straight.
Thank you. Okay.
Number 33.
23. And this is 34. And this is going to be him preaching. Then Peter opened his mouth, which is a very dangerous thing for Peter sometimes. But, Peter opened his mouth and said, "Oh, of a truth, I perceive that God is not no respecter of person, but in every nation he that feareth him and walketh righteousness is accepted with him. The word which God sent unto the children of Israel, preaching peace by Jesus Christ, he is Lord of all." And mine is in parentheses, Lord of all. That word I say ye know, which was published throughout all Judea, and began from Galilee after the baptism which John preached. Y'all remember the preaching that John did, that there was the Messiah's coming, okay, y'all remember that. 38, how God anointed Jesus of Nazareth with the Holy Ghost and with power, who went about doing good and healing all that was oppressed of the devil. For God was with him, and we are witnesses of all things which he did, both in the land of the Jews and in Jerusalem, whom they slew and hanged on a tree. Him God raised up the third day and showed him openly, not to all the people, but unto witnesses chosen before God, even to us. We did eat and drink with him after he rose from the dead. And he commanded us to preach unto the people and testify that it is he which was ordained of God to be the judge of quick, which is alive, and dead. To him give all the prophets witness that through his name whosoever believeth in him shall receive remission of sin. So he just preached the gospel. That was the gospel in a nutshell to a Roman centurion, however you say it. The Roman soldiers that are oppressing, one of the Roman soldiers that is oppressing on Judea, they don't have anything in common other than this Roman soldier believes, and he's a monotheist. He believes in that one God. He don't believe in the many gods like the rest of the Romans do. So he's done winning to believe in that the Jews' God is God, and he is an apostolate of the gate. He is not one of the apostolites, and that's a weird word, and it goes a lot deeper than what it sounds. But he hadn't picked up Judaism. He just believes in God, and that's all. He is still first and foremost a Gentile. He's fully Gentile. And this is like a pinnacle turning point in Acts, because the Jews at this point believed that Jews were the only ones that God would save. And this right here is opening that main door that we were all able to be saved because of what happened right here. Because I'm pretty sure none of us are Jews. I mean, if you got any kind of Jewish background, it's probably so small that they probably wouldn't even look at you.
Uh-oh.
Well, that's fine. That's awesome.
I'm going into Jewish stuff.
I get something else out of that too, out of verse 28 and out of verse 34.
Go for it.
All right? On verse 28, the last sentence says, "But God has shown me that I should not call any man common or unclean." 34 says, "In truth I perceive that God shows no partiality." What does that tell you? All men are created equal.
Yep. Exactly. He created all of us, and we all bleed red. So.
But religion is a huge thing when I say religion. And that's no different today than it was back then. That's just like so many get hung up on denominational titles. And my philosophy has always been, I don't care what denomination you came from, how'd you get saved? By whose name did you believe in Jesus Christ? Because there's still a lot of controversial things. There's a lot of controversial things right here between the Jews and the Gentiles. Because you've got some that have accepted Jesus, but they're still trying to hold on to the law. And Paul preached very strongly and harshly to them that, you can't have this both ways. But as TJ said, this is a huge turning point here, because now you have Peter, who was actually called and sent out to the Jews preaching to Gentiles.
That's why Jesus said he had the key.
He had to be the one, and that's the vision.
Well, see, that's the reason I got that out of
Yeah.
that, because he picked one person to go to another group of people.
Exactly.
Jews and the Gentiles.
But he used a representation of food because he was hungry. You know, they say the way to a man's heart is through his stomach. So he uses that and says, look, you see that your law says that these animals are unclean, you ain't supposed to eat them. That was just the baddest thing as hanging out with a Gentile eating an unclean animal. And it's kind of like a parable. I mean, you see this unclean stuff. Don't call unclean stuff that I've made, don't call it unclean because it's not unclean. It's mine.
Amen.
So,
Which verse we on?
and this is real important to Peter. Well, I said, why did he not send the other guy, Philip? Why didn't he send Philip? Why did he send Peter? It's because Peter needed this. Peter was still closed-minded to preaching to the Gentiles. And what he needs is what he's fixing to get right here, confirmation. And confirmation, have you ever had anybody say, God told me, or God led me to tell you this, and you never get any confirmation about it. But you say, you know, it seems like God's leading me to do something, and you get confirmation one thing after the next thing after the next thing, whether it's you open this and it's saying, hey, you know, it's right where you was at, or you hear one of the messages right where it's at, or you got 15 other people that say the same thing. Well, if somebody ever says, God told me to tell you this, you better be getting in the Word and trying to praying about it, trying to figure it out, because, I mean, ideas come from all over.
And you better be looking for the signs. Because that's just like, you know, he just had this with Peter, and he told Peter, look, it's the man coming to get you.
And Peter's going to get confirmation right here. You remember, we're fixing to get into it. Okay, while Peter yet spaketh these words, the Holy Ghost fell on all of them which heard the word. And they of the circumcised which believed were astonished, and that's the Jewish people, were astonished that the Holy Spirit now fell on all these Gentiles. As many as came with Peter, and that's talking about all the people that came with Peter, was astonished, because that of the Gentiles also were poured out the gift of the Holy Spirit. So all the people that came with Peter were like, what in the world is going on? This ain't supposed to be happening to the Gentiles. 46, for they had heard them speaking with tongues and magnifying God. Then answered Peter, can any man forbid water that these should not be baptized, which have received the Holy Ghost as well as we? That was a question. So he's saying, and you see what happened? This happened in chapter 2 at Pentecost, when the fires come upon all of them and they started talking in many languages. This is talking in many languages they did not know. That was confirmation for Peter, saying, hey, Peter, this is for real, dude. You can't deny it. I mean, if you couldn't deny the two angels that are in all these circumstances, seeing is believing, and you've seen it with your two eyes. This is confirmation right here. And then Peter says, does anybody, do y'all object to me just baptizing these cats? We're going to baptize them. Do y'all object? No. And he commanded them to be baptized. That's 48. In the name of the Lord. Then prayed they him to tarry certain days. When they got done baptizing, and I remember being baptized, that was like, you're on cloud 9. So they all got baptized and then prayed. They asked Peter to stay with them for more days, is what that means. So Peter, you just preached us the gospel, received Christ, we received the Holy Spirit. We've been baptized. Will you please stay with us? And, tell us about your fishing stories. We'll tell you about the war stories. Tell us about Jesus. We want to hang out with you. We are family now. We want to hang out with you, and we want to talk. That was chapter 10. Any questions? Y'all don't talk all the time. That's a very exciting chapter for me. There's a lot of cool information when you go back to history. You know, Caesarea was by the seaport by the sea. You know, there was a part of the seaport they built, the Romans built it 2,000 years ago. There's still rocks out there with mortar in between them, holding them together out there still right now, 2,000 years old. And they'll tell you that they figured out how to pour mortar, concrete, under the salt water and make it stay and it dry and do right under salt water. And they built this big old seaport thing for, you know, just like it is now, trading or whatever and getting back and forth from Rome. Because if you look at the map, it's all, they are on like a coast area. I would encourage all of y'all to go and look at these maps and look at where people are, and it's very interesting. And if you see Caesarea more than twice, it's because there's two Caesareas. There's one by the sea, all the way like west of Judea, right by the Mediterranean Sea, and then there's one like north-ish. That's not the one that they always talk about. That's a different Caesarea, and they're named after the same people, but different people named them, so that's why there's two Caesareas. So if you look in there and you see Caesarea that ain't by the sea, and you're like, I don't know, what is he talking about? That's what I'm talking about.